Our third speaker is Martin Crocker, who's Executive Director of NetSave. So a very warm welcome for Martin, please. Thanks.
Right, thank you. So Tim Berners-Lee, he says we need an online Magna Carta because he's worried the internet is not serving users, who he refers to as netizens. And I remember when he made that call. He didn't ask me to work on it, but I remember when he made that call, and I remember thinking, that's great, Tim, what's the Magna Carta? So today, I know the Magna Carta, thanks to Google, I know the Magna Carta is a document of significance as a symbol of the rule of law. But I also know that it wasn't actually written with that purpose in mind. It was constructed by the people of the time, as Joy mentioned, for the challenges of the time, which I would summarise like this. It's 1215, the barons of England have a problem, the king of England has a problem, the barons. The Magna Carta detailed 63 specific requirements that could make everybody's problems go away. Of course, in hindsight, it didn't actually achieve that, and it could so easily have been consigned to history as a failed peace treaty. Instead, here we are, 800 years on, talking about its potential application in the digital age. Tim Berners-Lee is certainly not the first person to talk about an online treaty to protect people's rights. Over the last 5 or 10 years, it seems that nearly everybody has had a pop at it. Before the last election, Gareth Hughes of the Green Party crowdsourced an online Bill of Rights for New Zealand, which you can still find online on his blog. The question really is, do we need a new one, or does the old one suffice in the digital age? And when you look at these online Bill of Rights, they mostly just take our existing rights and then add the words online. The Web We Want project that was promoted by Tim Berners-Lee and that Joy talked about was at least differentiated because part of it spoke specifically to technology choices. So its 5 guiding principles include 2 that you'd expect to find in pretty much any Bill of Rights or any charter like this: freedom of expression online and offline, and protection of personal user information and the right to communicate in private, i.e. protection of privacy. And before we move on to the topic of the night, I just want to take offence, essentially, to that concept in that first line, online or offline. Principles that apply offline apply online. Online or offline is a fallacy. I am me, you are you, your rights are constant. When you go online, you don't exit the jurisdiction of the place where you are physically located. New Zealand laws apply to you regardless of where you connect to. Therefore, you don't have to say freedom of expression online or offline. It's just freedom of expression. That's already your right, and it continues to apply. Now, having said that, you can group communication technologies together for the purpose of regulation. The recently passed Harmful Digital Communications Bill does exactly that. It targets New Zealanders who use digital technologies to harm people, but it does not seek to regulate an online space, as some would contend. Anyway, my key question is about what changed when technology came along. Our rights remained constant, and our expectation that governments protect citizens remains constant, our expectation that corporates follow rules remains constant. And that's where the Web We Want project gets a little more interesting, because its next 3 guiding principles were affordable access to a universally available communications platform, diverse, decentralised and open infrastructure, and neutral, I say neural networks, but that's, it's the future again, neutral networks that don't discriminate against content or users. Because you see, it's not the rules that have changed, it's the tools. The tools we use to protect rights and the tools that we use to impinge on people's rights. So what does that all mean? Is Tim Berners-Lee right that we need an online Magna Carta, or do our existing rights frameworks, including the legacy of the original Magna Carta, continue to be relevant? Could we achieve more with a few tweaks to our current legal, political and corporate structures and expect technology to create the future we want? Tim Berners-Lee is the father of the web, so it seems reasonable to push on and explore his concepts. And I've got 5 questions to frame up my thinking on this. Do we actually need to change anything? Who is our online Magna Carta actually for? What do we actually want? How do we actually get change? At this point, I realise I've used the word actually a lot in those. And isn't it just about money in the end? So question 1, do we really need to change anything? Today, I use the internet for email, for work, to purchase items, to transfer money, and to watch a video that I'm told rich people really didn't want me to see. Other than the video being clickbait for a scam, everything else worked exactly as planned. So why do people regularly say we need a new charter to protect the internet? To answer that question, we travel back 20 years. yes, to 1995, when Susie poisoned the All Blacks and South Africa won the World Cup. The core technology of the internet by now is just a few decades old, but the web as we know it is only just coming online thanks to Tim Berners-Lee's work with HTML. Netscape, Navigator, and Internet Explorer hit the shelves, and the internet boom begins. And that's when things changed, and pretty quickly. Some of the early netizens were very concerned about what was happening. But why? I mean, this thing that they'd built was becoming a huge success. What bugged them so much about that? Well, the answer lies in the internet's libertarian roots. Now, I note that the Urban Dictionary describes an internet libertarian as, quoting, a smart ass on the internet that claims the economy can work itself out on its own as long as there is no government regulation. This belief is usually based on the Economics 101 class they took a few years back. On closer inspection, most of the internet libertarians' facts don't check out. My apologies to anyone here who's an economics student, but the mockery of libertarianism is an indicator of how far the internet has come. But certainly the leading internet figures of the time were unapologetically libertarian. Their ethos is best captured by the work of the Electronic Frontier Foundation's founder, John Perry Barlow, who wrote the Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace. Many of you will be familiar with the text. I'll just read you the opening paragraph. Governments of the industrial world, you weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. On behalf of the future, so I suppose on behalf of us here today, so thanks for that. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. And this declaration was written at a time when true netizens were actually limited in number and relatively powerful as a result. Their special knowledge gave them opportunities that others could not access. They were the geeks and the nerds operating in spaces most people didn't know existed, bulletin boards and alt.dot binaries. They got technology where most people didn't, and this made them, in practical terms, a law unto themselves. But the internet quickly grew away from those libertarian roots. Those early netizens have been trying to turn the clock back ever since. The internet is a space that resisted rules by design, as we heard. And that was fine when it was dominated by academics in pursuit of free communication and knowledge exchange. Today, it is a place dominated by business. Where there is business, there has to be regulation. Where there is a need for regulation, there's a need for regulators. So libertarians don't like regulators. But there you go. The tool the libertarians built now needs regulators. So that brings me to question number 2. Who is our online Magna Carta for? The internet is for everybody. I don't say that as a slogan, I say that as a matter of fact. 95% of New Zealand households already have a broadband or dial-up internet connection. That's without counting the countless phones connected to the internet. In the near future, it's fair to say the internet will connect everybody to everything. So in Tim Berners-Lee's calls for an online Magna Carta, he talked about protecting the internet for netizens. By that he means all internet users, which by inference means everybody. So that means our online Magna Carta should serve everybody. Tim Berners-Lee also identified the groups who are not making the internet better as large corporates and governments. Government's desire for control and corporate greed are killing the opportunity of the internet. But at this point, I'm getting a little bit confused about who our treaty is for and between. So, for the sake of a little peace in my own mind, I cast my mind back to 12:15, running meat, doesn't matter. They may have gone by different names, who knows. The rows of tents with the various pennants flying, horses and armoured men everywhere. If we fast forward to 2015, would those pennants be replaced by the corporate banners of Google, Facebook and Twitter? The horses replaced by rows of Segways and hybrid cars? Are those businesses the equivalent of the barons? Would the role of King John really be played by governments? To date, that may be the most realistic model. Just as the voice of the peasant wasn't really heard at Runnymede, so too the voice of the netizen is not really heard at the international negotiating table. But as we've heard, the governments are certainly not the king on the internet. There is no king of the internet. So we do have at least 3 parties to negotiation: governments, businesses and netizens. And then of course both governments and industry will claim to operate in the interests of the netizen. But who really best represents your interests? Is it your democratically elected government or a US-based corporate? And the answer to that would sound obvious. We elect our government, so therefore they represent us. And perhaps the equation is that simple in New Zealand, but it's not as easy to decide in other countries. There are places where Google resists government requests or demands to protect users. Question number 3. What do we actually want? Let's assume we could get those 3 representative groups to the negotiating table. After some serious negotiating, we have 3 signatories sitting there posing for photos, much like this, holding nice pens. And in front of them is this new treaty. What is written on that document? Tim Berners-Lee said the main driver for an online Magna Carta was based on principles such as privacy, net neutrality, free expression, affordable access, and open and diverse infrastructure. But is that what netizens really care about? In early 2010, the BBC World Service commissioned a poll of 27,973 adults in 26 countries. At first glance, that poll supports the idea, with 53% responding that the internet should never be regulated by any level of government anywhere. But is government regulation of the internet what really keeps people up at night? That same poll asked people what caused them the greatest concern online. They said, top 5, fraud, 32%, violent and explicit content, 27%, threats to privacy, 20%, state censorship of content, 6%, and the extent of corporate presence, 3%. So the truth is that people want a safer internet, and by safer they mean less fraud, less offence, and less offensive content, not less regulation. The document the average modern netizen would sign would not please the internet libertarians. The average user would not choose absolute freedom at the expense of safety and stability. Most people are prepared to accept some level of surveillance to ensure safety. However, most users would support the Web We Want goal of affordable access to a universally available communications platform. But who really cares if it's built on diverse, centralised and open infrastructure, or that neutral networks that don't discriminate against content or users? As long as I turn it on and I can get to Facebook, that's all I really care about. The internet libertarians will say that is because the average internet user doesn't realise the significance of their choices. That may be so. But that's the thing, if you write a charter that reflects people's needs, then that's what you'll get. The web they want. They just want the rule of law to apply as much in a digital society as it ever has, and ideally more so. So question number 4, how would you actually get change? The Magna Carta, as we've heard, is a very specific document. It names names. We will remove completely from their offices the kingsman of Crocker.The. And I will not have said that rightly, but it doesn't matter. He's long gone. It gives specific numbers. The heirs of an earl shall pay £100 for the entire earl's barony. It solves specific problems that clearly existed at the time. No town or person shall be forced to build bridges. All fish weirs shall be removed from the Thames. And I think that's actually a very important lesson. People love the idea of creating symbols, but actually it's very hard to deliberately do in practice. Symbols become symbols over time. Sometimes it's better to just focus on solving the problem in front of you. And information technology and the internet have a history of doing this by themselves. Technology seldom waits for a treaty or an accord. People talk about the need to have freedom of expression, but the internet grants you the tools to enjoy freedom of expression today. People talk about the right to avoid surveillance, but there are any number of tools that allow encryption. In fact, major email providers are now encrypting email traffic by default for you. And yes, some of these tools are only accessible to people with the skills to use them. But if anything, the internet's natural ability to circumvent controls is more powerful than any treaty or statement has been so far. Question number 5, isn't it just about money in the end? Truthfully, how would you get corporates, governments and users to stick to the rules? How would you even get them to the negotiating table? What is their motivation? In a word, money. And a lot of the Magna Carta was devoted to the protection of barons' property, to taxes, the king's need to support his armies. Those were the key negotiating points in the Magna Carta. Money and power might have been used differently 800 years ago, but it was still a powerful motivator as it is today. In fact, money is the key lever that negotiators have. The internet is driven now by business and money, as I said earlier. Governments need money to perform their various functions. Corporates exist to make money. And that money comes from or is generated by people like us, who also want money. At the heart of any meaningful long-term agreement today would be key statements about who pays taxes to whom and where. And perhaps an international tax agreement is really the key to creating the web we want. So in summary, I don't actually see a need for an online Magna Carta or an online Bill of Rights. Or at least I don't think that's the best way to make the internet into the thing that we want. We already have the necessary existing rights and justice concepts, and some of those date back to the Magna Carta. Our current legal, political and corporate structures, they might need some reshaping to make better use of technology, but they're still doing a reasonable job of maintaining a balance in society. And perhaps most of all, technology that people are so worried about being captured or controlled is constantly evolving and avoiding that outcome anyway. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Martin, and very helpful to frame up those 5 questions and answer them for us.